Okay, instead of looking at my talking head, you get to look at my TV set. I was in the middle of watching Explorers, a 1985 movie with Ethan Hawke, River Phoenix, and I believe Jason something. um, and I won't go over the backdrop to this video because I already covered it in another video that I will link to down in the description. So this is a continuation of the ideology of that other video. So somebody has already invented UFO technology and patented it, and Tesla preceded them by 100 years. And it's basically the reciprocation of the spin axis of a rotating electromagnetic field. It matters which direction the rotation occurs because in one direction you are propelling the device forward, and in the other direction along that spin axis you are doing the opposite. You're moving away. So if you flip that, you can go downwards under the water against the buoyancy action of going submerged. Now, and then there's the other detail that's very important, and that is that the frequency of the mechanical reciprocation of the spin axis of the electromagnetic field has to exactly be in synchronicity with the rotation of that electromagnetic field around the spin axis. And the easiest thing to get off kilter is the mechanical reciprocation. And that's why Tesla had to come up with a method of reciprocating a piston such that it never varied in its periodicity. And Thomas Comerford Martin explains this in his book of the Tesla patents. The last chapter, chapter 63, I believe it is talks about Tesla's special generator, and that this is mentioned in chapter 18 of William Lyne's book, Lyne, that is on Amazon, called Pentagon Aliens. And essentially, what you do is you replicate the action of a reed within a wind instrument, such as a clarinet or an oboe. And what happens is the air blowing across the reed, even though the pressure of that airflow may vary or the ambient pressure may vary, regardless, the vibration of the reed never varies. And this is significant. So you just transfer the vibration of the reed to a piston. And this is what Tesla did. And it took me a while to figure it out, and I made an animated GIF of that. And I... I can't remember. I think I did a blog on the... It's either it might be on the josephnewman.info website or the Tesla Pierce Era 1931.info website. I can't remember which one I put it on. But I think I did a blog, and I put the animated GIF up there. I have it on my website, vinyasi.info, but it's kind of complicated for me to explain where it's located. Actually, it's not that complicated. vinyasi.info/circuitjs numeral 1. So circuitjs1 / texts, plural, TEX. And then underneath that should be a folder called Nikola Tesla, I believe. And in there, I think, is the GIF. Anyway, so this video has to do with, what does it have to do with? Let's see. Oh, yeah. How to rotate the magnetic field. So the rotating magnetic field, I thought of different ways, and when it came right down to it, the simplest way is to simply put one of Tesla's inventions, his bladeless turbine, on the axle of that's holding the toroidal iron core electromagnet, toroidal shape. So, first of all, the axle is reciprocating along the length of its axis, and at the same time, it's spinning, because the bladeless turbine is being propelled, it's being rotated by compressed air, blowing at the pancake stack of disks that constitutes Tesla's bladeless turbine. Now, there's supposed to be a hydraulic system involved here. But as we know, anybody who's read Tesla likes to take liberties when he talks about things to confuse us and misdirect us, like any good ventriloquist. So the hydraulic transmission is not where you think it is. It's not. It has nothing to do with the wheels. The wheels are not connected to anything. He takes out the transmission of a Pierce Arrow, or whatever car he was using in 1897 to give his very, very private demonstration to himself. There were no witnesses. The wheels are not connected to anything except the steering and the brakes. That's it. The handbrake and the manual brakes, and that's it. The foot pedal brakes. So what we have is a rotating electromagnet reciprocating along its axis, and the axis is oriented front to back, in parallel with the length of the car. And it's in the front of the car, just like any motor would be. They took out the engine and put in this specially designed motor. And he's got the compressor blowing on a bladeless turbine to spin the electromagnet and to reciprocate it at the same time. So he's using compressed air for two actions, not one. The special generator of Nikola Tesla merely is a piston, a reciprocating action of a piston, but we can add the bladeless turbine to that axle and both rotate it and reciprocate it at the same time. So that's going to set up vibrations that have to be dampened. And also, what's worse, or in addition, I should say, to that, there's also a damping effect that we have to produce in which the car is going to want to jerk forward. Because UFOs, we know how they operate, right? They make right-angle turns at 4,000 miles an hour, stop on a dime, and we can't have that happen to a car because all we're doing is levitating or neutralizing inertia of the motor. And the rest of the car, along with its passengers, has to follow along without getting whiplash or destroying the car. So we have to dampen the sudden movement forward under acceleration of the motor. And to do that, we use a hydraulic spring action that is oriented at the front end of the motor. So that when the motor pitches forward, or I should say moves forward suddenly at high speed, instantaneous, without acceleration, from 0 to 4,000 instantaneously. That's a tremendous acceleration. So you have to dampen that. So the hydraulic system merely has to do with the damping effect that has to be implemented to protect everything and the passengers. It has nothing to do with the wheels. The wheels spin freely because they have to, because the car has gravity and, mass, and it's being pulled down to the earth. Only the motor lacks gravity. And the motor is oriented forward to move forward, and so a hydraulic spring is fashioned in front of the motor to dampen its sudden movement forward and to store energy in that compressed fluid medium to be released afterwards when the acceleration is reduced, when you get the car up to cruising speed, and now the motor can move backwards within the under the hood, within the chassis under the hood, to release the pressure buildup in the hydraulic spring that's in front of it, at the front end of the motor, in front towards the front end of the car. And then for stopping, you just use the brakes like you normally would. So you only have to use the motor once in a while in short bursts to accelerate the car. And once you get it going, it's just for an instant when you think about it. So I would imagine his throttle, his accelerator pedal, is a snap switch that turns on the motor just for an instant and then turns off. And that's going to be plenty of accelerative force to move the car forward. And in fact, he's going to have to size his electromagnet to get to permanently regulate how much acceleration he wants to get. And if he wants to get more, you just keep pumping the accelerator pedal, you know, in sequence, one after another, to keep adding to the acceleration that you already possess. Because we already know when a body is in motion, it stays in motion. So all you have to do is add more acceleration of the same amount you did before in pulsed sequence to add up to the total amount that you want that might be significantly larger than each pulse. So if you have a certain accelerated force that you want to have a 4,000 pound Pierce arrow, well, they didn't even make them in 1897, I don't think. Well, whatever car he had, see, yeah, Tesla liked to tell stories, so whatever story he told Peter Salvo is subject to, we don't know. But in 1897, he wasn't trying to impress anyone, just himself. And so whatever car he used, 3,000 pound, 4,000 pound, whatever it is, whatever thrust is needed to get the car moving up to 90 miles an hour, divided by 10, let's say, just ballpark figure, just pick one out of the hat, 20, you know, divide by 20. To get an accelerated force that is the only amount that you want the snap switch under the foot pedal, accelerator foot pedal, to actually release from the motor. And then all you have to do is pump it a few times to keep getting the car to move faster than actually that. But if you want to pull out of a parking space or, you know, from a dead stop, you just pump it once. So you pump it periodically to gradually get it up to speed. And once you got it up to speed, it's fine. Stop pumping it. Take your foot off the gas, or away from the pedal at any rate, because you're not pumping it anyway. You're not holding it. You just have to drive the car a little differently than you would normally, which is great. For my calf muscle in my right foot is abolished, and the shin muscle too, because I have to keep using that. I hate driving. To tell you the truth, at my age, I hate driving. I never liked driving. Even when I was a kid, I didn't like it. Anyway, so we're only, okay, so that covers just about everything. The hydraulic system, that's the point of this video, is the hydraulic system. Plus I had to back up and recapitulate the prior video. You don't have to watch it. Pretty much you got everything in this video. But it's, no, actually no, you didn't get the patent. So there is a patent that I got this information from. And I got the patent from a web article that talks about the movie Explorers. It's really cool. We have the knowledge now of Nikola Tesla, and it's not what William Lyons says. And I covered this in the prior video, so I won't cover it again. What else? Okay, so I'm going to go back to watching my movie. And I think, I'll show you the cover. Well, no, I won't. I'm too lazy. So that's enough talking. I think this is such a cool topic because, and there's a reason for all of this, a backdrop, why I'm motivated. I've spent a good deal of time studying a reactive motor design that I believe was used by Nikola Tesla at some point in his career for some purpose, I don't know what. But in the course of studying the design, I came to the conclusion that it's entirely not efficient to apply it to a conventional electric motor concept. Because it just doesn't work very well. Because for one thing, it wants to operate at a moderate frequency, when in fact motor design, conventional motors rotate at a very low frequency. They can't rotate any faster. That's why we have a 60-cycle AC system worldwide, or North America wide, 50 cycles in Europe. Because that's how fast you want a axle of a motor to rotate. You know, multiply by 60 times 60, which is the square, that's 3,600 RPMs. You're not going to want a motor to operate far beyond that range. And yet, according to Arthur Matthews, on the newenergy.org website, nuenergy.org website, he actually talks about the frequency being used in that 1897 private demonstration is quite high. I believe it's 1800 RPMs, which reduces to, I believe it's 500 cycles per second. So, how do you deal with that and convert it into rotation? You can't. Unless you do what I thought was a hydraulic system involving valvular conduits, namely solid-state one-way valves, plus Tesla's bladeless turbine. Both of those are patented inventions of Nikola Tesla that we know about in the patent literature. And then baffled with a throttle, or throttled with a system of baffles. But I don't think that's it. I mean, then it would be a reciprocating motor with a plunger, plunging into the hydraulic fluid to cause it to vibrate. Not unlike a ultrasonic, what are they called? Humidifier, because they operate the same way. But then I thought to myself, you know what? I like this video better that I made on YouTube back in June or July of 18 or 19? I think it was 19, just last year. Just levitate the motor, you know? Because then you don't waste energy. All the energy is tied up in the power level and not wasted on trying to rotate a shaft involving the inertial mass, you know, involving torque requirements to rotate the thing and get the car moving forward. It's so much waste of energy. And then you have to deal with moving parts of the circuitry of this reactive device that I came up with. It's a loss of efficiency, and why bother? You know, it's so inefficient. Tesla called his flying machine an ideal flying machine. He didn't call it a UFO. He called it his ideal flying machine. And as William Line states, all of Nikola Tesla's patents were geared for this one objective, in support of it, because there's a lot of various technologies that go into it. For instance, if you've got to have a assault device, you can't have ammo on board because it self-detonates once the electrostatic field of this thing starts to get sky high. And of course, the FCC is not going to like this device either. Because the electrostatic field is a consequence, or electromagnetic, whatever. It's going to mess up people's reception or TVs or whatever, you know. You're going to get the FCC involved. But, you know, if you're out in the boonies and away from the city, you might get away with it. Out on some mountaintop or out in the middle of the ocean, you might get away with the operation of this device. Or, in the case of Nikola Tesla back in 1897, the FCC didn't come into being until 1934. Which just happens to be 3 years after his 1931 supposedly second EV conversion demonstration with Peter Savo. But that's is a whole other line of reasoning, probably involving helium, replication of the Allman Brothers demonstration in Denver, Colorado of 1920. But back in 1897, I think he was reapplying his levitation device to an automobile and seeing if he could adapt it. And I think he did. I think that's what happened. Anywho, well, I think I've covered a lot of stuff. I can't think of anything else to say off the top of my head. My main concern right now was the hydraulic system. What is it, you know, and how do you rotate the what's the most efficient way to rotate the electromagnetic field? Do you create a four-pole DC motor with commutators? Do you create a four-phase AC motor? What do you do? Nah, you don't bother with any of that. You just take a toroidal coil with an iron core. I'm presuming an iron core, unless it's an aluminum core, I don't know. And, hey, you know, you might get better results with an aluminum core to that toroidal coil. Since we are working here with levitation, and aluminum is paramagnetic, so why would you want iron? I don't know. So let's see. Now I think I might have covered everything. Of course, the other thing is you have to dissipate your charge buildup, and that might be the purpose of having a big aerial on the back end of the car. You know, we don't know. The Peter Savos story may be a Nikola Tesla story, not given to Peter Savo, not made up by Peter Savo, meant to confuse Peter Savo, because Peter Savo, we do know, was an informant, a thief, trying to hang around. He hung around and stole to see whatever he could steal. And so I'm sure Nikola Tesla knew that, and he told him stories. He made up stories that might have had some truth in there, but not enough to do anything useful with. That's why he had 12 radio tubes to throw off Peter. They were never... I don't know. It is subject to a lot of caution in that particular instance. But in 1897, nobody's attention is there, and all the more reason to take it seriously. You know, it's just like traffic of lemmings. Wherever the lemmings go, I don't want to go there, because it's probably the wrong place to go. It's probably where all the lies are located, and the fiction and the misguidance and disinformation. So it's best to go where nobody else is going. And 1897 is the best place to be, because nobody's going there. Everybody doesn't want to talk about it. It's like, who gives a shit, you know? They all want to talk about 1931 and Peter Savo to discredit Nikola Tesla. So it might be that 1931 is a nice ploy for discrediting Nikola Tesla, because it is 3 years before the instigation of the FCC, and maybe somebody made up the story simply not to discredit Nikola Tesla alone, but to convince Congress to come up with the FCC. There you go. And outlaw radio. Remember, we had to outlaw radio. And why? Because we also had to regulate the airwaves. Because, you know, the Nazis didn't invent or didn't evolve and develop the R&D of UFO technology in a vacuum. They did it with the help of U.S. banking interests. And in fact, the Nazi experiment was a United States of America experiment done overseas, away from home. That's essentially the backdrop to the Nazi development of their culture, of their ideology, their existence. They were funded by us as an experiment. So it was important for us to ignore Nikola Tesla and think of him as a crackpot from the very, very earliest of his existence. Not because we were dummies, but because we didn't want him in our commercial sector. And it probably started with J.P. Morgan, because we all know J.P. Morgan had something to do with the the creation of the Federal Reserve. And J.P. Morgan was also a backer of Tesla's last project, the one that J.P. Morgan pulled the plug on. So it probably, Nikola Tesla was somebody to keep an eye on and then put a stop to when he got a little dangerous. And there are stories, it's worth mentioning, I'm going to repeat it, I've said it before. John Jacob Astor III, I believe, was going to fund Nikola Tesla, and he went down with the Titanic. And President Garfield was shot just before he was going to give a speech in Buffalo, New York, in his support of Nikola Tesla. So it's pretty obvious to me that it's been orchestrated. All of these different seemingly sidebars are all related in this grand conspiracy to prevent the commercialization of the humanitarian efforts of Tesla to give us his technology. Now, he didn't want to give us the knowledge of his technology. He just wanted to give us the benefits of the technology because he wanted all the accolades for himself. Wouldn't work if he gave us the knowledge. He wouldn't be Mr. Wizard anymore. So he had an ego, but he also had a very highly developed consciousness in which he could come up with this stuff. It's amazing, the stuff he came up with. I mean, he was practically enlightened. Almost, just on the edge, the cusp of becoming a saint, but not quite there yet. And I can appreciate that. The vicissitudes of being near the borderline and not going all the way, because materiality is still attractive. The material world is still attractive. It's still got its desirability. It's about the only way I can think of it nicely in a neutral context. Okay, now I've said enough.